The Blue Lagoon, a Romance, by Vere Stacpoole. Book 1, Part 1. Chapter 1. Where the Slush Lamp Burns. Mr. Button was seated on a sea chest with a fiddle under his left ear. He was playing the Shan Van Vat and accompanying the tune, punctuating it with blows of his left heel on the forecastle deck. "Oh, the French are in the bay," says the Shan Van Vat. He was dressed in dungaree trousers, a striped shirt, and a jacket baize, green in parts from the influence of sun and salt. A typical old shellback, round-shouldered, hooked of finger, a figure with strong hints of a crab about it. His face was like a moon, seen red through tropical mists, and as he played, it wore an expression of strained attention, as though the fiddle were telling him tales much more marvelous than the old bald statement about Bantry Bay. Left-handed Pat was his forecastle name, not because he was left-handed, but simply because everything he did wrong, or nearly so, reefing or furling or handling a slush tub. If a mistake was to be made, he made it. He was a Celt, and all the salt seas that had flowed between him and Connaught these 40 years and more had not washed the Celtic element from his blood, nor the belief in fairies from his soul. The Celtic nature is a fast dye, and Mr. Button's nature was such that though he had been shanghaied by Larry Marr in Frisco, though he had got drunk in most ports of the world, though he had sailed with Yankee captains and been manhandled by Yankee mates, he still carried his fairies about with him, they, and a very large stock of original innocence. Nearly over the musician's head swung a hammock from which hung a leg. Other hammocks hanging in the semi-gloom called up suggestions of lemurs and arboreal bats. The swinging kerosene lamp cast its light forward, past the heel of the bowsprit to the knightheads, lighting here a naked foot hanging over the side of a bunk, here a face from which protruded a pipe, here a breast covered with dark mossy hair, here an arm tattooed. It was in the days before double topsail yards had reduced ship's crews, and the forecastle of the Northumberland had a full company, a crowd of packet rats such as often is to be found on a Cape Horner Dutchmen Americans, men who were farm laborers and tending pigs in Ohio 3 months back, old seasoned sailors like Paddy Button, a mixture of the best and the worst of the earth, such as you find nowhere else in so small a space as in a ship's forecastle. The Northumberland had experienced a terrible rounding of the Horn. Bound from New Orleans to Frisco, she had spent 30 days battling with headwinds and storms. Down there, where the seas are so vast that 3 waves may cover with their amplitude more than a mile of sea space, 30 days she had passed off Cape Stiff, and just now, at the moment of this story, she was locked in a calm south of the line. Mr. Button finished his tune with a sweep of the bow and drew his right coat sleeve across his forehead. Then he took out a sooty pipe, filled it with tobacco, and lit it. "Pathrick," drawled a voice from the hammock above, from which depended the leg. "What was that yarn you was beginning to spin ternight about a lit me dawn?" "A witch me dawn?" asked Mr. Button, cocking his eye up at the bottom of the hammock, while he held the match to his pipe. "It vas about a green thing," came a sleepy Dutch voice from a bunk. "Oh, a leprechaun you mane. Sure, me mother's sister had one down in Connaught." "Fat vas it like?" asked the dreamy Dutch voice, a voice seemingly possessed by the calm that had made the sea like a mirror for the last 3 days, reducing the whole ship's company meanwhile to the level of wasters. "Like? Sure, it was like a leprechaun. And what else would it be like?" "What like vas that?" persisted the voice. "It was like a little man no bigger than a big forked radish, and as green as a cabbage. Me aunt had one in her house down in Connaught, in the old days. Oh, Musha, the old days, the old days. Now, you may belave me or belave me not, but you could have put him in your pocket, and the grass-green head of him wouldn't more than have stuck out. She kept him in a cupboard, and out of the cupboard he'd pop if it was a crack open, and into the milk pans he'd be, or under the beds, or pulling the stool from under you, or at some other diversion. He'd chase the pig, the crather, till it'd be all ribs like an old umbrella with the fright, and as thin as a greyhound with the runnin' by the marnin'. He'd addle the eggs so the cocks and hens wouldn't know what they was after with the chickens coming out with 2 heads on them and 27 legs fore and aft, and you'd start to chase him, and then it'd be mainsail haul, and away he'd go, you behind him, till you'd landed tail over snout in a ditch, and he'd be back in the cupboard. He was a troll, murmured the Dutch voice. I'm telling you he was a leprechaun, and there's no knowin' the divilments he'd be up to. He'd pull the cabbage, maybe, out of the pot boilin' on the fire, for'n at your eyes, and baste you in the face with it. And then, maybe, you'd hold out your fist to him, and he'd put a golden sovereign in it. Wished he was here, murmured a voice from a bunk near the knightheads. Hothrick, drawled the voice from the hammock above. What'd you do first if you found yourself with 20 pound in your pocket? What's the use of askin' me, replied Mr. Button. What's the use of 20 pound to a sayman at say, where the grog's all wather and the beef's all horse? Gimme it ashore, and you'd see what I'd do with it. I guess the nearest grog shop keeper wouldn't see you comin' for dust, said a voice from Ohio. He would not, said Mr. Button, nor you after me. Be damned to the grog and them that sells it. It's all darned easy to talk, said Ohio. You curse the grog at sea when you can't get it. Set you ashore, and you're bung full. I likes me drunk, said Mr. Button. I'm free to admit, and I'm the divil when it's in me, and it'll be the end of me yet, or me old mother was a liar. Hat, she says, first time I come home from say Rowlin', storms you may escape, and women you may escape, but the Pothine'll have you. 40 year ago. Well, said Ohio, it hasn't had you yet. No, replied Mr. Button, but it will.